Chapter 8. Tag was definitely going to sell his Nashville house and move to the ranch house full-time. First of all, the cook was fantastic. Someone to rival the great Mrs. Garrio, who had her own spot at the town museum. Her cooking had been so good. When he'd called down at 8 a.m. to ask Bellamy the breakfast options, she'd asked what he wanted. His only request was something hearty. 45 minutes later, a plate had arrived, stacked with light, flaky biscuits and creamy gravy, perfectly crisp bacon, and fluffy scrambled eggs. Tag had moaned softly to himself the entire time he ate. A person wouldn't think so, but a wonderful meal like that had inspired Tag to finish the song he'd started on the flight out from Nashville. It may have included something about biscuits, but country music listeners appreciated a good biscuit better than anyone he knew, really. Second, after his breakfast and finishing the song, Tag had sat on the couch and stared out the big window at the mountains and grinned to himself. It surprised him how much he'd missed those mountains, the hikes he'd taken with Roxy, and the numerous times he'd tried to declare his feelings in song at the top of some trail they'd taken. Roxy was always more fluent in country music romance after she communed with nature. Camping trips he'd gone on with his dad. He'd better call his mom and tell her to come out and see him. The whole idea of the mountains invigorated him. He scribbled down some thoughts before heading into the bathroom for a shower. When he came down the staircase, it surprised him to see Roxy sitting with Quinn and Bellamy at the big dining table, all three women in intense conversation over something on Quinn's iPad. He figured after the scene Roxy put on yesterday, he'd have to hunt the girl down to see her again. "Good morning, ladies," he said, drawing their attention up to him. He stumbled when Roxy flashed him a smile along with the other two. Had aliens abducted his former best friend in the night and replaced it with some poor imitation? Roxy hadn't smiled so easy like that at him since before that fated night in Laramie. "How was your breakfast, Mr. Tag?" Bellamy grimaced at the title she'd given him and stood. "I haven't eaten food so good in years, maybe not ever." He rubbed at his stomach. "I'm really looking forward to lunch. Introduce me to the chef, because I plan to write an entire tribute song to the skills." Bellamy's face turned beet red and she raised her hand. "Really?" Tag started in surprise. "You cook and manage?" "Not usually." She gave a forced, embarrassed laugh. "Our usual cook is a snowbird who spends her winters down in Arizona. We let her off early this year so we could pare down the staff." "She can't be better than you." Tag shook his head, incredulous that the backup had served him such an amazing breakfast. "She taught me everything I know." Bellamy grinned at him. "She's my mom." Tag couldn't help casting a look over at Roxy. "Looks like I need to frequent this place some more to be the judge of that." Roxy kept her smile in place. "You won't be disappointed either way, Star." A grin swept across Tag's face the same time his stomach swooped with a sense of triumph. She had given him that nickname the first time she'd heard him sing. What had changed to make Roxy accept his presence, to go so far as to allow some of their old friendship to slip back in? "I'm thinking of hiking up to Paintbrush Springs. Want to come?" he asked. Roxy cast a panicked look over at Bellamy, the first hint that her easy demeanor with Tag might be an act. "Let me check what's on the schedule today and get back to you. Belle, will you show me that thing you asked me about earlier in your office?" "Yeah, of course." Bellamy's answer came suspiciously quick as Roxy's march across the lobby to the small office behind two French doors. Roxy forced a smile as she yanked shut the curtains to cut him off from view. "What have you all been up to?" Tag asked Quinn when they'd been left alone. "Just chatting with Roxy and Bellamy about some projects Roxy wants to take on for the ranch. I happen to know some people that Roxy's interested in learning more about." Quinn flipped closed the folio she kept her iPad in and trotted across the room toward the stairs. "Like what?" Tag asked, intrigued. He followed, but conveniently stopped near the doors of the office where he could hear Bellamy and Roxy's voices. "Nothing to do with official Taggart Dubois business, so you can keep your nose out of it unless Roxy wants to tell you." Quinn smirked and hurried up the stairs. Tag didn't follow and push the issue, especially since with her gone he could slide closer to the office and listen in on Roxy and Bellamy. "The thing is, I would take any other guest on this hike," Roxy said. "Then go. Prove to Nash and you and Tag that you and Tag are just friends." Bellamy's voice had a hint of exasperation. "I just don't know," Roxy protested. The swooping in Tag's stomach crash-landed and blew up somewhere near his knees. So her attitude was an attempt to show her boyfriend that things were fine between her and Tag, not a consequence of her changed heart. He clenched his jaw. No matter, he could work with that. If Roxy let him have a foot in the door, he'd find a way to kick it open. "Fine, okay," Roxy said, her voice near the door, cluing Tag into the fact that he'd missed Bellamy's response and that Roxy was soon to find him eavesdropping. He took a few quick steps towards the couches in the middle of the living room and stood near one of the wooden end tables, stained in a worn gray tone. Like his room upstairs, the main room of the ranch house exuded that modern country chic look that made the house feel homey and welcoming. He pulled out his phone to text Morgan about his plans, letting him know that Tag wouldn't need him. The ranch house had kept their promise about things being a secret, and Tag doubted he'd need Morgan at all on this trip. If he didn't want to stick around, maybe Tag should send him home to spend time with his family. Tag wouldn't mind moving a few notches up on Morgan's mom's favorites list. Although, considering he'd showed up unannounced to sing at her and Morgan's father's 50th wedding anniversary party, he was pretty high as it was. "I'd love to join you on that hike," Roxy said, coming out of the room. Tag turned, putting his phone in his pocket and smiling back at her, the same easy one she'd flashed him when he'd first come downstairs. "Perfect. I'll grab my things and we'll head up." She nodded, and since he knew this was an act, he caught her swallowing in nervousness as he headed toward the stairs. His mind spun with a few words as he climbed the stairs, thoughts he could work on as they hiked to help him convince Roxy that the right place for her was with him.